First tonight, Venezuela has accused Washington of blatant theft and piracy after troops seized an oil tanker off the country's coast. The foreign ministry said the move was part of a plan to plunder Venezuela's energy resources. U.S. officials said the vessel was transporting sanctioned oil to Iran, and the revenues were supporting terrorist organizations. The seizure marks an escalation of U.S. operations in the southern Caribbean. When President Trump was asked what will now happen to the oil in the seized tanker, he said he assumed the U.S. is going to keep the oil. Venezuela has some of the world's largest proven deposits of oil in the world, and the Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro, has previously accused the U.S. of trying to get its hands on the country's reserves.
As you probably know, we've just seized a tanker on the coast of Venezuela, a large tanker, very large. Largest one ever seized, actually.
Well, what happens to the oil on that ship?
Well, we keep it, I guess. Huh?
Where does it go? What port does it go to?
Well, you have to follow the tanker. You know, you're a good newsman, just follow the tanker.
Do you know where
follow it, get a helicopter and follow the tanker.
Is it true it's going to
But we're gonna, I assume we're gonna keep the oil.
It should be noted that a powerful public opinion movement has risen around the world rejecting the military aggression of the United States government against Venezuela and the Caribbean. It should be noted that almost 70% of the people of the United States, according to polls, are against military aggression or a war in South America against Venezuela. From Venezuela, we ask and demand an end to the illegal and brutal interventionism of the United States government in Venezuela and Latin America. From Venezuela, we demand no more regime change policies, coups d'état, and invasions in the world. No more Vietnam. No more Somalia. No more Iraq. No more Afghanistan. No more Libya. Enough of eternal wars, damn it. Enough of imperial wars. Enough of imperial massacres.
Nicolas Maduro, and before him Donald Trump. Well, for more on this, I'm joined now on the line from New York by Arise special correspondent James Blue. James, good to see you. Thank you for joining us. Just talk us through exactly what happened according to the Trump administration. It's been described by the U.S. as an interception of this oil tanker.
Yeah, I mean, basically what the U.S. government is saying is that this tanker was headed to Iran, taking oil that Venezuela was sort of moving to Iran under the window of illegal transfer. As you know, there is an oil embargo on Iran for its sort of non-compliance with various UN sanctions, and Venezuela, which is the country with the largest known supply of oil, is one of Iran's strategic partners. And the Trump administration has said that this oil was headed to that port. One of the things that we know about this tanker is that in the past, as it has sort of recorded and reported its location, it has falsified its location. It has in the past concealed where it was going. And so this is another sort of move, an escalation in the Trump administration's works and opposition to the Venezuelan regime and to the leadership of President Maduro, the leader of Venezuela.
And what's been the reaction from Venezuela to this seizure? I understand they've been pretty punchy in their response, calling it a grave international crime.
Yeah, I think Venezuela is very, very upset. And, you know, one of the things that's happened over the past sort of 2 weeks is that the U.S. has really escalated its actions against Venezuela. We do know that there was a phone conversation between President Trump and President Maduro. And what's very clear is that it was during this conversation that President Trump did make some very concrete offer for President Maduro. We don't know exactly what that offer was, But it seems now that there is a steady escalation in terms of what is happening by the U.S., by U.S. forces, by the U.S. Coast Guard, by the U.S. military in the Venezuelan situation. In terms of the reaction on the ground, I think the Venezuelans are very upset because this is again an escalation. They see it. Is this the efforts just before some type of invasion? There's some sense that the CIA is working on covert operations across the country. And, you know, one of the things that was very curious about the timing of this actual seizure is just as the Venezuelan opposition leader, the duly elected president, was out of the country to get the Nobel Peace Prize, this actual operation launch. That coincidence, I think, has really upset a number of Venezuelans, and they see it as yet another American interference into their domestic affairs. And I just think there's a lot of concern. What is going to continue to happen? What is the end game that the US is requiring? And how is it going to impact us as ordinary Venezuelans who are really suffering because even though they have large oil reserves, the country is in shambles.
Indeed, it is. And we're going to come to Maria Corina Machado in a minute, the lady who won the Nobel Peace Prize. But, I mean, isn't all this, though, I mean, would it be unreasonable to say that all this is about Donald Trump wanting Nicolas Maduro out? I mean, we've got this oil tanker seizure, we've got US warships attacking boats from Venezuela accused of being drugs vessels, and President Trump complaining about US migrants Venezuelan migrants coming to the US. I mean, it just feels like Mr. Trump is ramping up as much pressure as possible, and it's not unreasonable, is it, to see it as a form of sort of modern form of gunboat diplomacy?
Yeah, no, I mean, it is gunboat diplomacy in a way. I think I would call it, it's actually, it's more kind of neighbor bullying. The U.S. wants a desired outcome and is now placing pressure on the entire regime to get that outcome. And, you know, they started by blowing up the ships they labeled as members of the drug cartel. They are now taking the oil, seizing the oil that is owned by Venezuela. So I think there is an escalation. And the real question is, are these the ways to actually get something to change in Venezuela? I think there's probably some disappointment that in the conversation that President Trump had with President Maduro, that nothing came of that. We don't really know. And it could be that this is all sort of a set piece that they have decided to let play out, which would give President Maduro some room to kind of sort of show that he isn't a patsy and that he hasn't completely folded to U.S. wishes. But we don't know that for sure. And I do think that there's some sense that it's only going to escalate and that the end game is removing President Maduro, but we have no idea what would come next. What would happen if Maduro were to fall tomorrow? Who would lead Venezuela? What would the country get in terms of support? And how would Venezuelans react to that reality?
Meanwhile, of course, James, you mentioned the Venezuelan opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado. She's been in hiding, but she's been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize and has arrived in Oslo. She arrived hours after the ceremony. Any idea how she managed to make her way to Norway in spite of being barred from traveling by the Venezuelan authorities? I understand she wore disguises and had to go through about 10 military checkpoints.
Yeah, no, it is really quite a feat that someone who is sort of the most wanted person within Venezuela was able to escape and get out. The word is that she was assisted by a number of governments who are supportive of the Venezuelan opposition. There was a boat trip, I believe, to it's either Curacao or Suriname that got her into a country where she was able to actually get on a flight and fly to Oslo. There's a lot of pressure on her right now because she is in open support of the U.S. campaign against President Maduro. And some Venezuelans see this as somehow anti and counter to the sort of values and the purpose of the Nobel Peace Prize. I will say most of that complaint and that against her are coming from Maduro loyalists. So you have to understand like where it's coming from. Having said that, I do believe her increased profile, this sort of daring ability to move from Venezuela to Oslo to the spotlight of the Nobel Peace Prize is additional pressure on President Maduro and will sort of add to the, just another nail in the sort of drive, another step in the drive by the Trump administration to get him out.
James, thanks ever so much. James Blue is Arise special correspondent. He was talking to me on the line there from New York.